Today's story is about a man who spent 27 years locked in a tiny prison cell. No freedom, no normal family life, no easy days. Many people expected him to come out angry. They expected him to hate the people who hurt him. But when he finally walked out, he chose something stronger. He chose forgiveness. He chose peace. He chose to help his country heal. That man was Nelson Mandela. His story is not just about prison. It is about hope. It is about courage. It is about a heart that never broke. Now let us go back to South Africa, to a time when the color of your skin could decide your whole life. Nelson Mandela was born on July 18, 1918, in a small village called Mvezo in South Africa. His birth name was Raleigh. In his language, this name meant troublemaker, and in one way the name was right. Nelson did make trouble, but not for bad reasons. He made trouble for injustice. He grew up in the beautiful hills of the Eastern Cape. His father was a leader in their community. Young Nelson lived a simple life. He played with other children. He looked after cattle. At night, he listened to elders tell stories around the fire. These stories were about African heroes. They were about brave warriors and leaders who fought for their people. These stories stayed in Nelson's heart. When Nelson was only 9 years old, his father died. This changed everything. A man named Jongin Taba became his guardian. Nelson went to live in the royal home. There, he watched how leaders made decisions. He saw that they listened before they spoke. He learned an important lesson. A good leader does not serve himself. A good leader serves the people. Nelson went to school. He was a good student. He loved learning and asking questions. At school, a teacher gave him the English name Nelson. In those days, many African children were given English names at school. It was part of the system. That system told people that European ways were better than African ways. But Nelson did not simply accept everything. He wanted to understand the world. Slowly, he began to see that something was very wrong in his country. White people had power, land, and freedom, but black people had almost nothing. Black people could not vote. They could not live where they wanted. They could not even walk freely in some places. This system was called apartheid. It separated people by race. It gave power to white people and took away rights from black people. Nelson went to university at Fort Hare. It was one of the few universities for black students in South Africa at that time. There, he met other young people who also wanted change. They talked about freedom. They talked about equality. They talked about a better future for their country. But Nelson joined a student protest. Because of this, he was expelled from university. It was a difficult moment in his life. He returned to the royal home. But soon he faced another problem. His guardian wanted him to marry a woman chosen for him. Nelson did not want this life, so he made a brave decision. He ran away to Johannesburg, the biggest city in South Africa. Johannesburg was huge, noisy, and full of energy, but it was also full of injustice. Nelson saw apartheid more clearly than ever. He worked different jobs. He continued his studies. Then he began to study law. This is where Nelson Mandela's real journey began. In Johannesburg, he met people who were not just talking about change. They were working for it. Nelson wanted to join them. He wanted to fight for freedom. He wanted justice for his people. In 1944, when Nelson was 26 years old, he joined the African National Congress, or ANC. This group fought for the rights of black South Africans. But at that time, the ANC was very gentle. They wrote letters. They made requests. They asked the government politely for change. Nelson and other young members felt this was not enough. They wanted action, not only words. So they formed the ANC Youth League. They organized protests, strikes, and campaigns. They wanted to put pressure on the government. They wanted the world to listen. Nelson became a lawyer. He opened a law office with his friend Oliver Tambo. They helped black people who were arrested under apartheid laws. Every day, Nelson saw how the system destroyed people's lives. People were arrested for not carrying the right papers. Families were separated. Communities were destroyed when the government said black people could not live in certain areas. Nelson saw pain again and again, and his heart became stronger. In 1948, the situation became worse. A new government came to power. They made apartheid even stronger. They created more laws to separate people. They created separate schools, separate hospitals, separate beaches, and separate entrances. Everything was separate, but everything for black people was worse. Nelson and the ANC knew they had to fight back. In 1952, they launched the Defiance Campaign. This was a peaceful campaign of resistance. Thousands of people broke unfair laws on purpose. They went to white-only areas. They refused to carry passes. Many were arrested, but they did not fight back with violence. Nelson traveled across the country. He organized people. He gave speeches and inspired hope. People called him a hero, but the government called him a troublemaker. They wanted to silence him. They banned him from attending meetings. They controlled where he could go. But Nelson did not stop. He had seen too much suffering. He had seen mothers crying. He had seen people beaten by police. He had seen dignity crushed and hope destroyed. And deep inside, he knew one thing: change had to come. In 1955, the ANC and other groups created the Freedom Charter. This document shared their dream for South Africa. It said South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white. The Freedom Charter said everyone should have the right to vote. Everyone should have equal rights. Everyone should live with dignity. The government responded with anger. In 1956, they arrested 156 activists, including Nelson Mandela. They were charged with treason. The trial lasted 5 years. 5 years of fear, 5 years of pressure and waiting. But in the end, all the accused were found not guilty. Still, the struggle was not over. Something terrible was about to happen. In 1960, in a place called Sharpeville, police opened fire on peaceful protesters. They killed 69 people. Some were women and children. This shocked the world. It also changed Nelson Mandela's thinking. For years, Nelson and the ANC had believed in nonviolent resistance. But now Nelson felt that nonviolence alone was not working. The government was using violence. People were dying. So in 1961, Nelson helped create an armed wing of the ANC. They attacked government buildings and property. They tried not to hurt people. They wanted to send a message. We will not stay silent. We will fight back. Nelson knew this was dangerous. He knew he could be arrested. He knew he could be killed. But he felt he had no choice. Freedom had a price, and Nelson was ready to pay it. Nelson went underground. He moved secretly from place to place. He wore disguises so the police could not catch him. People said he was very hard to find. He even left the country secretly to ask other African countries for support. But in 1962, after many months underground, Nelson was arrested. Someone had betrayed him. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Then in 1963, while he was already in prison, police found secret documents from the movement. Nelson and other leaders were charged again. This time the punishment could be death. The trial became famous. The world was watching. Would Nelson Mandela be sentenced to death? Would his story end inside a courtroom? Nelson decided to speak. He talked about freedom. He talked about dignity. He talked about justice. He explained the suffering of black people under apartheid. He said he wanted a country where all people could live together equally. At the end of his speech, he said he was ready to die for this dream. The courtroom became silent. Many people expected Nelson and the others to receive the death sentence. But they were not sentenced to death. They were sentenced to life in prison. In 1964, Nelson Mandela was taken to Robben Island. It was a prison on a small island near Cape Town. This would be his home for many years. Robben Island was a harsh place. Prisoners slept on thin mats on the concrete floor. They had little food and very little comfort. Every day, the prisoners were taken to a limestone quarry. They broke rocks under the hot sun. The bright white stone hurt their eyes. This work damaged Nelson's eyesight, but it did not damage his spirit. Nelson Mandela refused to be broken. He turned the prison into a place of learning. He studied. He encouraged other prisoners to study too. Robben Island later became known as Mandela University. Many men learned and grew there. Even in prison, Nelson was still leading. Nelson stayed calm and dignified. He was respectful even to the prison guards. He spoke to them like human beings. He learned Afrikaans, the language of many of his oppressors. He believed you must understand your enemy. Slowly, some guards began to respect him. The authorities tried to break his spirit. They offered him freedom if he gave up the struggle, but Nelson refused. He said he would accept freedom only when his people were free. He would not leave his people behind. Years passed slowly. 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. Outside the prison, the world did not forget Nelson Mandela. People protested. They sang songs. They demanded his release. Free Nelson Mandela became a global movement. Artists, leaders, and ordinary people joined the call. The pressure on South Africa grew stronger. Inside prison, Nelson had very little contact with his family. He could write and receive only a few letters. He could see visitors only rarely. Imagine this. Only 30 minutes with your family after many long months. then waiting again in silence. His mother died, but he was not allowed to attend her funeral. His eldest son died in a car accident, but again, he was not allowed to go. The pain was enormous. But still, Nelson did not give up. He exercised every morning and kept his mind strong. He read books. He thought about the future. He thought about the South Africa he wanted to build. And in that prison, he made a powerful decision. When he became free, he would not seek revenge. He would seek peace. After 18 years on Robben Island, Nelson was moved to another prison. Later, he was moved again. Conditions became a little better. By the late 1980s, apartheid was becoming weak. People were protesting inside South Africa. Other countries were putting pressure on the government. The government realized it could not continue forever. It needed to talk, and the person it needed to talk to was Nelson Mandela. In 1989, F.W. de Klerk became president of South Africa. He knew change had to come. He began talks with Nelson Mandela. They talked about peace. They talked about democracy. They talked about how to avoid civil war. Then, finally, on February 11, 1990, Nelson Mandela walked free. After 27 years in prison, he stepped out into the world again. He was 71 years old. He had spent almost half of his adult life in prison, but he did not walk out broken. He walked out with his head high. His fist was raised. His face carried a smile. Thousands of people were waiting for him. They cheered. They cried. They sang. The world watched this moment. A man had walked out of prison after 27 years, but he did not come out with hate. In his first speech as a free man, Nelson thanked the people who fought for his release. But he also said the struggle was not over. He said he was a servant of the people. He would continue working for freedom until every South African had equal rights. The next 4 years were difficult and dangerous. Nelson and President de Klerk worked to end apartheid, but not everyone wanted peace. Some white extremists wanted apartheid to stay. Some black activists did not trust the talks. Violence happened in many places. At times, it looked like South Africa could fall into civil war. But Nelson kept working for peace. He traveled across the country. He spoke to communities. He calmed people and asked them to give peace a chance. He even reached out to his former enemies. He wanted to show that forgiveness was possible. This shocked many people. People expected Nelson to be angry. They expected him to want revenge. But Nelson understood something deeper. Revenge could destroy the country. Forgiveness could help the country heal. Peace needed a brave heart. In 1993, Nelson Mandela and F.W. de Klerk received the Nobel Peace Prize together. They had helped end apartheid peacefully. A new South Africa was coming. Then came the historic day. April 27, 1994. For the first time in South African history, everyone could vote. Black people stood in long lines. Some waited for hours. Many were voting for the first time in their lives. Old people who had lived their whole lives under oppression cast their votes with tears in their eyes. It was more than an election. It was a new beginning. The election was peaceful. The ANC won. And on May 10, 1994, Nelson Mandela became the first black president of South Africa. A man who had once been a prisoner now became the leader of his nation. This was one of the most powerful moments in history, but Nelson knew the hardest work was still ahead. South Africa was divided. There was poverty, fear, and pain from many years of apartheid. How do you heal a nation after so much suffering? How do you build unity when people carry so much pain? Nelson created the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Victims of apartheid could tell their stories. People who committed crimes could confess the truth. The goal was not revenge. The goal was truth and healing. It was painful, but it helped the country move forward. People heard terrible stories of torture, murder, and suffering. Many cried, but slowly the nation began to face its past. Nelson Mandela served one term as president from 1994 to 1999. He could have stayed longer. Many people loved him, but he chose to step down. He wanted to show that democracy is not about one person. It is about the people and the system. After his presidency, Nelson continued to work for peace and justice. He spoke about education. He helped children and supported good causes. He also spoke about HIV and AIDS. He wanted people to understand, care, and help each other. Nelson Mandela became a global symbol of forgiveness, dignity, and hope. He showed that real strength is not only in fighting. Sometimes real strength is in forgiving. Nelson Mandela died on December 5, 2013, at the age of 95. The whole world mourned him. Leaders and ordinary people remembered his courage. He was buried near the place where his journey had begun. But his message did not die. His legacy still lives today. Nelson Mandela showed the world that one person can make a difference. He showed that you can fight for justice without losing your humanity. He showed that forgiveness is not weakness. Forgiveness can be strength. Hope can be stronger than hate. His life was not easy. He suffered greatly. He made sacrifices most of us cannot imagine, but he never gave up. He never stopped believing in a better future. And because of him, South Africa changed. Nelson Mandela once said, "It always seems impossible until it is done." His life proved these words. The impossible became possible because one man, and many people with him, refused to accept injustice. So, my friends, this is the story of Nelson Mandela, a boy from a small village who became a freedom fighter, a man who spent 27 years in prison and then became president of his nation, a man who chose forgiveness over revenge. Thank you for watching English with Ani. I hope this story inspired you and helped you improve your English. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and subscribe for more stories like this. And tell me in the comments, which part of Nelson Mandela's story inspired you the most? Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep believing that change is possible.